Hey guys, welcome to Beating the Backlog. It's where I go through and try to beat all of these games in this game room. The only catch, I play all my games randomly. So you never know what you're going to get. This is the soft reboot of what used to be called the Games I've Played Recently videos. But that name was a little clunky and the format of the videos were a little too long. So I decided to redo them here in this new show for you guys. So let's dive right in. We have 5 games and let's go right into them. The first game we have coming up is kind of a little mini wallet buster and an uncommon game on the NES, and that's Ghost Lion. When you boot up this game, it actually says Legend of the Ghost Lion. So they changed it, I guess, for the artwork on the cartridge to make it look a little bit more poppy. So this game is done by Kimco, they're known for just cranking out tons of just mediocre RPGs, and this game is no exception. The cover art of this game is fantastic. It has a girl in like athletic wear who looks like she's on her way to a Bon Jovi concert circa 1987. And I had no idea this game was an RPG when I went into it. I just assumed it was going to be an action game. But the premise of the game is that a lion attacked your village, and your parents have set off to hunt it, but they've never come back. So you have to set off yourself and save them. You can see right away that the main character of the game looks nothing like the awesome and totally rad girl who's on the cover of the game. Instead, it's like this 8-year-old girl who looks like she's on her way to Sunday school class. But the gameplay is just your standard RPG. The catch is that you summon spirits out of items to kind of fight alongside of you, similar to Pokemon, which is okay, and this predates Pokemon by a good bit, which is a nice idea. One of the strange elements of this game that really bring it down is that you don't level up through grinding. You level up instead by finding these shards hidden around the map and in the various dungeons. This causes a real issue because you can't grind a level up, which totally sucks because the random combat encounters in this game happen all of the freaking time, and there are huge difficulty spikes. The enemies dodge attacks like super frequently. It feels like they dodge 30 to 50% of all the attacks. Also, your inventory is limited. You have to be concerned with how many healing items you can carry, and the healing items don't level up. So the first healing items that heal for 50 hit points at the beginning of the game are the same ones you have at the end when you have a ton more health. So it's really easy to blow through all your healing items just to heal yourself. And also, some enemies hit you so hard that you can't recoup your health. Like if the enemy hits you for 200 damage every turn, you can't use 4 healing items every turn. You can only use 1, so you're guaranteed to lose at that point. Also, the enemies seem to go like 2 times for every 1 of your turns, which is really bad and can become very overwhelming. And to make matters worse, the run from battle option doesn't work. So whenever you try to run from battle, it says you escaped from battle, but the enemy tracked you down. And it goes right back into combat, and they get an extra turn on top of that. You get to the point where you go into a battle and there's no way to really win, and you become overwhelmed unless you know what's going to happen beforehand, which is extremely frustrating. The enemies always attack first. Even when you go back to the starting area of the game and you're like super leveled, the enemies will go first and they'll just bink you for 1 or 2 damage, which is terrible. And I really dislike that. On top of that, the companions that you summon, they lose their health from attacking. So they only have like an energy meter. When they get hit and they take damage for you, they lose health. When they attack, they also lose health. This leads to some serious balance issues with the game. As for the graphics are, I guess, fairly decent for an RPG on the NES. I mean, they look like any other RPG on the NES, more or less. And the music's fairly catchy. I enjoyed the music a lot. And I do like that this game is set in Africa, which is not something I was expecting to see. Even though most of the characters are white, there is some diversity in this game, which is nice to see. And I like that they try to do something a little bit different. But overall, this is just like a Nintendo Power game, as I like to call them. You really need a guide to make it through this game. The chances of you succeeding without knowing what's going to happen are very low. The save points are very spread out. And when you go into the dungeons, you could spend an hour or two walking around lost before you get the item you need to level up. And there's essentially a level up item, like I said, in every single dungeon. You really need to find those and find all of them. And some of them are located in very remote areas, kind of esoterically, and you really need a guide to make it through this. But the game is good enough to finish, if you use a guide, which I have to admit, after about 8 hours into the game, I resulted to doing. And it really improved the experience for me. So I recommend doing that. So Ghostline was a fairly decent little RPG. It's not one of the best on the system, but it held up on there, and it's one of the best Kimco RPGs I've ever played. So I would say this game is like a 7 out of 10. I would play it if you're a fan of the genre. Up next is a game on the Switch that completely caught me by surprise. I did not think I was going to like it, and I ended up loving it, and that's To the Moon. So this was a limited run game that I just picked up on a whim because I saw that it had really good reviews, and I'm so glad that I did. The story is the strong point of this game, and really, this game is a narrative adventure. It's all about the story. There's not much gameplay. It's just about experiencing this crafted world that the developers made. So this old man has hired this futuristic company to grant him his dying wish. And they have to come and investigate through his memories to essentially uncover his motivations and make his wish happen by changing his memories so he thinks that it actually happened. They're not really going to make him experience his wish. It's going to implant memories into his mind to make him think that it actually happened. And of course, his wish is to go to the moon. So that's going to be a challenge to make that happen, right? What's great about this game is that it deals with a lot of heavy subject matter like developmental disorders, death, loss, love, motivation, and aspirations. And it does it in an extremely touching and mature way that I've really never seen, or I've rarely seen in any sort of media, let alone a video game. So I think they handled that really well. And the story is told so well and crafted in a way that is just a head and shoulders above other games that I've played. As you can see, the game has a really nice 32-bit RPG kind of aesthetic to it that's really charming, and it has absolutely remarkable and fantastic music to match. It can get somber at times, but it's always very moving and it's very memorable, and I loved it. And there are times in this game where the music just elevates the whole experience to another level that I wasn't expecting. This is one of the most emotionally complex and best told narratives of any game I've ever played. And it actually had me sobbing at several different instances. I was crying, guys, with like tears coming out of my eyes. It's a must play, and it is truly wonderful. If you like great stories in a video game, you have to play To the Moon. It is one of the best I've ever seen, and it is unbelievably fantastic. This is good enough to be like a good movie. So I can't recommend it highly enough, and it is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Up next, we have an arcade game that was ported to the Dreamcast, and it's very rare and sought after there. But they did an HD version on the PS3 years ago, and that is Under Defeat HD. So there's a website called Shmups Forum where all the big shmup nerds get together to debate on which shmups are the best ones and which ones are the worst. And every year they do a poll to try to determine what the top 25 best games in the genre are of all time. And I decided to participate in this several years ago, but I realized that a lot of the shmups I played, 10, 12 years ago, I didn't have good memories of. So I've added them back into the backlog to kind of refresh my memory about them. And this is one of those games. And I got the platinum on this in 2013. So I've spent some good time with it, and I had very fond memories of this. Unfortunately, my PS3 from that time period died, and I lost all my unlocks. So I have to start from fresh for this video. So this is basically a military shooter, as you can see. And There's two modes to this game. There's New Order mode, which is widescreen and is an arrange mode. And if you're not familiar with what an arrange mode is, it's where they kind of tweak the gameplay and it's almost like a remix of an original arcade game. And that's what you're seeing here. Included is also the arcade mode in its standard Tate view. But you play as a helicopter, and the gimmick of the game is that you can change your angle for which you aim. So basically, as you move to the right, you'll aim to the right. As you move to the left, you'll aim to the left. And when you press the shoot button, it locks you in position. I find that to be a little clunky, and I don't really like those mechanics. Luckily, the PS3 version lets you change this to a sort of pseudo twin-stick shooter where you move with the left analog stick and you can aim with the right analog stick. And I feel like that makes the game a lot better. As you can see, the game sort of has that polygon Dreamcast look to it, which makes sense because it was originally made during that time period. It's not bad, but it's not my favorite for a shmup. And this has that characteristic look from the early 2000s where everything is just kind of brown. To go along with that, the music is okay, but it's really forgettable, which makes for a package that just doesn't really pop in my memory. It's very bland looking. There are a few good songs in there, especially on the latter levels, but in general, it's a pretty lackluster sort of presentation. I do like that they tried to do something new with this game, but it has some issues. The game has this sort of strange isometric perspective that takes a bit of getting used to, obviously. And I also hate how the stages just sort of drift around as you're moving. It's kind of like trying to hit a moving target when you're also moving, and so is the ground. So that can be strange. It's kind of like three different elements working against you. The bullets are easy to see, but sometimes the enemies will launch these like heat-seeking rockets at you, and they blend in with the scenery. They're gray over like a gray or brown background, and they get me almost every time. And I found that the majority of my deaths were from that. All that being said, I think this is an okay game. My opinion of it from 9 years ago has dropped greatly. I find it to be kind of ugly and clunky, and I don't really like the mechanics of aiming to the left and the right. I think that adds an extra complication into the system that makes the gameplay less fun. You know, I said it had forgettable music, and it doesn't really stand out graphically. And I'm still surprised that so many people are so high on this game. I just checked the Shmups forum rankings as of the time of this video, and this game comes in at number 50 of the greatest shmups of all time. I don't agree with that. I think it's a decent game, but I would not place it that high. So is Under Defeat something you want to play on the PS3? If you're already a well-versed fan of the genre, possibly. I think it's like decent enough, but if you're just getting into shmups, this is not a good spot to start. You need to start something with standard shmup mechanics. This tries to turn those on its head and add more complications into it than the game really needs. So I would give Under Defeat a 6 out of 10. We have another shmup for you. This one's a horizontal shmup. There was some controversy with this game when it came out. There still is a little bit of controversy with it. But it's Razion EX, and I have the limited edition. So this is done by NG Dev, who I have to say I'm not a very big fan of. There was a controversy when this came out. They released the game on their website for the Switch, and they only released it physically. There was no digital version of it. And I don't know how many copies they made, maybe 1,500, but they sold out really quickly. And if you didn't get one, then there was basically no way to play this game unless you had like the original Neo Geo version that they made as a homebrew, you know, a decade ago. Luckily, I was able to pick it up, and later on, through some poking and prodding from the community, they finally did release the game digitally, and they've done another print run of this game. So you can get it now and play it. Like I said, it was done by NG Dev. They've also done like Last Hope on the Dreamcast. They did Fast Striker. They did Gunlord. They're a European company, and their games are very European styled, meaning they feel like they should be on an Amiga computer or something like that. It's very focused on the graphics and the atmosphere more than it's focused on the gameplay, in my opinion. So in this game, you have a standard shot and a charged shot that cancels enemy bullets. And the charge shot is on a timer. So what you do is you collect these cubes from fallen enemies to recharge your charge shot faster. And that's really the key to the gameplay. That's the whole crux of it. To go along with that, they place the enemies in sort of annoying spots where you can really only reach them with the charge shot. And there are no other power-ups to help you, so you really need to kind of memorize the levels and the timing for the charge shot to know when and when not to use it. You can see from the graphics, it kind of has that chunky look. Like I said, it looks like an Amiga game, and this is what NGDev is so known for. I find this presentation to be very ugly and boring, and I don't like the 3D rendered graphics. It has this sort of breakbeat techno music, which I know it's all the rage in Germany, where I think NGDev is located. But to me, I just find it kind of boring and frustrating. It doesn't amp me up. It just makes me irritated. As a musician, I like a lot of surprises and diversity in my music, and I find that a lot of breakbeat techno just kind of doesn't do that. It's just made for dancing, and that's not what I want when I play a shmup. In addition to all that, the ships and the enemies and the environments, they're just like an amalgam of nonsense to me. It just, nothing stands out. It all just sort of blends together, and I find it very boring and generic and really uninteresting. However, the game does have a very cool scoring system, and I think that's really neat. So it builds up multipliers based on how you're doing, and it's fun to keep the multiplier going using your charge shot and things like that. So that's where the most fun you're going to have with this game really comes from. One of the big flaws of the game is that the enemy's bullets are obstructed by your shot. The layer of your shot is over the enemy bullet, so you'll be blasting away and an enemy bullet will go behind your shot where you can't see it and kill you, which is usually how I ended up dying in this game, and I don't like that. You need to be aware of what's coming at you, and it makes it feel like it wasn't really my fault when I died, and that's a big no-no in a shmup. Are you ever like out and about and you see some sort of media, like be it a movie or a book or a TV show or a video game or whatever, and you think, man, this just was not made for me, like at all? Razion EX is that game for me. It is a shmup, which I love, and it's my favorite genre, and I play a lot of them, but this one just did not do it for me. I found it really boring and ugly, and it has little to no appeal for me outside of just being a shmup. And I see that a lot with NGDev, the developer of this game. I have played a lot of their games, and in general have not enjoyed them. Maybe there was one or two here or there that I thought were kind of okay, but in general, they just do not suit my personality. So this game might be great for you. A lot of people really love it. Shmup Junkie did a great video on it, and he was a huge fan and really praised it. But for me, sorry guys, not so much. I did not think Razion EX was very good, and I do not think it was worth the whole hype of people paying like hundreds of dollars for this, you know, to scalpers when it came out, because they just had to play it. It's not that good. It's a 5 out of 10. It's pretty mediocre. Last up, we have a game that was another arcade game. It has been ported to like every system under the sun, and this may be one of the worst versions of it, if not the worst, and that's T2. The arcade game on the flippin' Sega Game Gear. So if you're my age, you probably saw this game in the arcades. It was a classic Midway game where you had these submachine guns and you would aim at the screen and shoot. You could play with a friend. It was a lot of fun in the arcades. However, it was an ultra quarter muncher. This game, it was not designed to be fun. It was designed to get money from you. And so carrying on with that, to get more money, they decided to port it to basically everything. The plot, I think we've all seen Terminator 2. This takes place in the super far off distant future of the year 2029. So far away we could never imagine it. Where, what is it, Skynet and all of its robots and the AI have taken over the world, and you basically have to blast the hell out of them to save humanity. So instead of a light gun, you move the aiming reticle around the screen like a gallery shooter, and you have a machine gun and rockets basically assigned to your 2 Game Gear buttons, which are the only 2 buttons on the Game Gear. And the rockets have limited ammo, and the machine gun kind of overheats if you use it too much, so you kind of have to pulse with it to keep the temperature low, and that's really the strategy of the game. There are upgrades and ammo hidden in lockers around the stages, which you're going to need because this game is relentless. The enemies pop up out of nowhere. It's hard to avoid damage. You're constantly just hemorrhaging life nonstop. Like I said, this game is designed to get your quarters, not to be a good time. Or scratch that. It was designed to just be a good enough time to keep pumping money into the machine. But the game it's fine. The arcade was fine. This version's not great. However, I have to applaud the sheer audacity of the developers to actually bring this to the Game Gear. Turns out they brought it to the Game Boy as well, which I can't even imagine how bad that's going to be. Still, the game has a lot of flaws. The stages are way, way too long and ultra repetitive, and it gets really boring really quickly. They try to mix it up. You know, the first stage is just a battlefield where you're shooting things, and then in the second stage, you're in a warehouse where there are civilians. You have to try to not kill the civilians. And the third stage, John Connor is there, and you have to like escort him while he's driving a truck and keep the truck from getting destroyed. So that they added some variants here and there. I wasn't able to make it all the way through the game or beat it. It's just too hard on the Game Gear, and the aiming is a little clunky, as you can imagine. I think there are 7 stages, and I made it to stage 5 a couple times. But by then I'd had my fill, so I was ready to move on. The game's okay. It's really brought down by its ruthlessness and its attempt to try to steal your quarters. I feel like they should have toned it down a little bit for the Game Gear or for the home console ports, which maybe they did. I'm not sure. I haven't played the arcade version in like 20 years or something. But it makes it kind of an unfun experience on repeated playthroughs. If you're just going to play it once or twice for 5 or 10 minutes, you could have some fun with it. But if you really dive into it and try to learn this game and get good at it, it does not hold up, and it is not a fun time learning it, to say the least. So how is T2 the arcade game on the flippin' Game Gear? Not very good. I'd say it's a little bad. It's like a 4 out of 10. It's more frustrating and not fun than it is fun. Still, if you want to try it for 5 or 10 minutes, or you could pick this up for $1 or $2, go for it, but don't go out of your way to get this. Okay guys, that's 5 more games off the backlog. We're making a little bit of progress, but it's slow going, as you can imagine. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you liked the content and you made it this far, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. We're trying to grow this channel, and leave a comment. I love those. I answer every single one of them. And thanks again for joining me. There's new videos every single Saturday, so come back for the next one.